4. You cannot build love on absence. You cannot create intimacy with a ghost. At the heart of every meaningful connection is presence. Real, full, emotional presence. 4. Without that, what you're calling love is really just a performance you're doing by yourself. 4. And this is where so many people get stuck with avoidant partners. They confuse moments of proximity with true intimacy. They mistake breadcrumbs for a meal. 4. An avoidant partner might share your space, they might even share your bed. But if they are not emotionally available, if they are not willing to open up, to risk vulnerability, then what you have is not love. It is a one-sided attempt to keep something alive that has no heartbeat. And I know that sounds harsh, but you need to hear it, because love cannot survive where there is chronic emotional withdrawal. It needs reciprocity. It needs two people leaning in. 4. From a psychological perspective, what you're dealing with is a fear-based response. Avoidants have learned to protect themselves by limiting closeness. Maybe it was childhood neglect, maybe it was inconsistent care, maybe it was betrayal. Whatever the root, they built a system to feel safe, or in that system tells them, when someone gets too close, pull away. So they do. And if you're the one on the receiving end, 4, you feel like a punch in the gut. One moment you're connected, the next moment you're abandoned emotionally, sometimes even physically. 4. And the human nervous system is not built to feel safe in that kind of instability. Here's the deeper issue: every time you accept this withdrawal, 4, every time you tolerate it, you reinforce the idea that love is supposed to hurt. You teach yourself to be okay with loneliness inside a relationship. 4. That is one of the most damaging lessons you can ever internalize. 4. Because it doesn't just affect this relationship, it becomes the lens through which you see love going forward. And suddenly connection feels dangerous. 4. Vulnerability feels risky, and you start to mirror the same avoidant patterns that hurt you in the first place. Presence is not a luxury in love, it's oxygen. 4. You cannot breathe without it. You cannot grow without it. And yes, you might be tempted to wait for the avoidant to come around, to heal, to change. But you have to be honest: how long are you willing to put your heart on the shelf, waiting for someone else to choose you fully? Because every day you wait, 4, every day you hold back your own needs just to avoid pushing them away, you are abandoning yourself. 4. And the most devastating thing about staying in that cycle is not losing them, it's losing you. The truth is, love demands courage. It demands showing up. For even when it's uncomfortable, if your partner is unwilling to step into that arena with you, then the hard truth is they do not deserve the love you are offering. 4. Because love, at its core, is about two people choosing each other fully, not one person begging for scraps of attention while the other keeps the door half shut. 4. So let this be the moment you stop negotiating with someone's absence. Let this be the moment you decide that presence is non-negotiable. 4. Because the moment you claim that truth, you stop chasing someone who isn't there, and you start calling in someone who actually is. 4. Here's a 600-word expansion of key point 2, written to flow naturally after the first segment, in the same tone and rhythm. 4. One of the most dangerous illusions people fall into with avoidant partners is the belief that love requires sacrifice. Specifically, the sacrifice of yourself. 4. You start to believe that if you just tone yourself down a little more, if you become a little less emotional, a little less needy, 4, a little more easygoing, then maybe, just maybe, they'll finally stay. And what's really happening is something far more insidious. 4. You are slowly betraying yourself, piece by piece, in exchange for crumbs of connection. Think about it: love is supposed to expand you. 4. It's supposed to give you room to breathe, to grow, to express the full spectrum of who you are without fear of rejection. 4. But when you're involved with an avoidant, that natural instinct to show up fully becomes a risk. Because every time you reach for closeness, they recoil. Every time you express a need, they pull away. And so you start editing yourself. You shrink. You silence your voice to keep the peace. 4. You learn to celebrate the rare moments they engage while quietly starving for something deeper. This is not love. This is self-abandonment disguised as devotion. 4. And here's the psychological trap: the more you bend to accommodate their fear of intimacy, the less you feel like yourself. Yet the emptier you feel. 4. The more desperately you chase their approval, thinking if they could just give you that one validating moment, everything would feel okay again. But it never does. 4. Does it? Because their approval is not the medicine, it's the poison. It keeps you hooked while eroding the very foundation of who you are. 4. When you betray yourself to keep someone, you lose twice. You lose them because they were never really there, and you lose you. 4. Because the version of you that's left is only a shadow. And the truth is, no relationship is worth the cost of your identity. 4. No love is worth becoming invisible to yourself. This is where the emotional and philosophical boundary must be drawn. 4. Love cannot require you to sacrifice your dignity, your joy, or your voice. The moment it does, it ceases to be love. It becomes a transaction rooted in fear. 4. Not intimacy. Real love demands authenticity. It invites the full truth of who you are, not just the fragments that feel convenient to someone else's comfort zone. And here's the paradox. By trying to become less, to be loved, you actually make love impossible. Because love cannot connect with a mask, for it needs something real to attach to. The more you abandon your authentic self, the harder it becomes for anyone, including the avoidant, to truly see you. Or what they end up relating to isn't you. It's the performance you've created to survive the relationship. That is not connection. That is survival mode. 4. So you have to be willing to reclaim yourself, even if it costs you the relationship. You have to decide that your voice, your truth. 4. Your emotional needs are not negotiable, because if you don't protect them, no one else will. And when you do, something powerful happens. 4. You stop chasing love from people who can't give it, and you start attracting people who can. Never forget this, for betraying yourself is far too high a price to pay for someone who isn't even showing up. Choose you, every time. Absolutely. Here are the final 2 expanded segments, key point 3 and key point 4, written to flow naturally from the previous parts of your speech. 4. Carrying the same tone, energy, and psychological depth as Tony Robbins would deliver. 4. Key point 3. Their detachment is not a reflection of your value. One of the most destructive outcomes of loving an avoidant is the way their detachment starts to distort your sense of worth. You try to give, to nurture, to connect, but it's like hugging a stone wall. They don't respond, or they respond sporadically, and you start asking yourself, what's wrong with me? Why am I not enough to make them stay present? That is the trap. Their withdrawal becomes your mirror, and suddenly, you're measuring your value by their inability to engage. But let's be clear, their emotional unavailability is not proof of your inadequacy. 4. It's a reflection of their fear. 4. Attachment theory teaches us that avoidants often cope with closeness by deactivating their emotional system, shutting down their own needs to feel safe. When someone has built their identity on self-protection, your love isn't received as comfort, it's experienced as threat. They aren't rejecting you, for they're protecting themselves from what love represents: vulnerability, openness, accountability. And yet, because human beings are wired for connection, 4. Your brain interprets their distance as danger. Your nervous system goes into overdrive trying to solve the problem of their absence. 4. You believe if you could just do more, be more patient, more understanding, more perfect, then they would finally choose you. 4. But that belief is toxic because it ties your worth to their dysfunction. It makes you think love must be earned when in reality, healthy love is given freely. 4. This is why the cycle with an avoidant is so emotionally exhausting. You are constantly auditioning for a role that doesn't exist. 4. You keep trying to prove you're worth loving to someone who isn't even looking. And the danger is, if you stay long enough, you start to believe their indifference is evidence that you are unlovable. That is a lie. 4. Their detachment is not a verdict on your value, it's a reflection of their wound. So, 4. You have to take back the power you've given them as the judge of your worth, because they are not qualified to hold that role. Someone who cannot meet your emotional needs cannot be the authority on what you deserve. And the moment you stop seeking their validation, 4. Something inside you shifts. You remember that your value was never up for debate. It has been constant, whole, and intact all along. 4. Never let someone's fear of love convince you that you are unworthy of it. Their silence does not define you. Your worth is not conditional. 4. And anyone who cannot see it does not get to keep access to it. Key point 4. Love should expand you, not deplete you. When love is real, it fuels you. It makes you more of who you are, not less. It's not supposed to feel like walking on eggshells or carrying the emotional weight of 2 people. 4. But with an avoidant, that's what it becomes: you carrying the relationship while they stand still. And at first, you convince yourself this is just a phase, that if you can just hold everything together long enough, they'll catch up. But here's the truth: if you are always the one carrying the weight. 4. It's not a relationship, it's emotional labor masquerading as love. And emotional labor without reciprocity is unsustainable. It burns you out from the inside. 4. Your mind becomes consumed by managing their moods, interpreting their mixed signals, trying to decode their silence. You stop having space for your own dreams, for your own joy, your own life. You begin to orbit around their avoidance, and slowly you disappear from your own story. Love is meant to expand you, for it's meant to inspire you to become more alive, more expressive, more free. Not more anxious, more hesitant, more small. 4. When you give everything and get almost nothing back, you're not in love, you're in depletion. And here's the hard part to accept. 4. Staying in that dynamic doesn't make you loyal, it makes you lost. Philosophically, love is an exchange of life energy. It's not meant to be a one-way transfer. For when both people give, both are replenished. But when only one gives, the system collapses. That's why you end up feeling like you're running on fumes. You are. Or you're trying to sustain a connection that can't sustain you back. You deserve a love that meets you, not one that drains you. 4. You deserve a partner who adds to your life, not one who subtracts from it. Because love is not supposed to cost you yourself. The moment it does, 4, it stops being love and starts being self-erasure. So stop romanticizing struggle. Stop calling it passion when it's really just pain. For love is not meant to hurt this much. It's meant to lift you, to fuel your spirit, to support your becoming. If it's not doing that, 4, it's not love, it's depletion with a pretty disguise. And if that's what you've been living through, let this be the moment you choose something different. 4, let this be the moment you decide that your energy, your joy, your life force are too sacred to be spent on someone who won't even show up. 4. Because real love will never ask you to disappear to keep it alive, it will ask you to grow. If you want, I can now polish all 4 expanded points together into one seamless 15 to 18-minute speech, fully unified in tone, pacing, and emotional arc. 4. Absolutely. Here's a 600-word expansion of key point 4, written to flow seamlessly with the earlier segments and delivered in the same intellectual, direct, 4, and deeply human tone as Tony Robbins would use. There's a fundamental truth. We rarely stop to question. Love is supposed to enrich your life, not hollow it out. 4. It's meant to amplify who you are, not reduce you to someone you barely recognize. And yet, when you're with an avoidant, you start to feel like you're constantly pouring energy into a bottomless well. No matter how much you give, 4, it's never enough to fill them, because they're not even holding out their hands to receive it. And you, thinking love can fix anything, keep pouring, 4, until you're left with nothing but exhaustion and confusion. That depletion doesn't happen all at once. It's slow, almost imperceptible at first. 4. A skipped conversation here, a forgotten promise there, a subtle dismissal of your feelings. You tell yourself it's small, that it's not worth making a fuss over. 4. But over time, those moments accumulate like tiny cuts, and before you know it, the vibrant, 4, emotionally alive version of you has been replaced by someone who's constantly tired, anxious, and unsure of themselves. That isn't love, that's erosion. 4, and the most dangerous part is how easily you normalize it, because the human mind adapts. It learns to survive whatever environment it's placed in. 4, so you start calling chaos passion. You call emotional starvation independence. You call walking on eggshells being understanding. You rewrite the rules of what love is supposed to feel like just to keep the relationship intact. But the cost is enormous, because every time you normalize dysfunction, you silence the part of you that knows you deserve more. 4. You were not born to shrink to make someone else feel safe. You were not designed to dim your light just so someone who fears intimacy won't be blinded by it. Real love will never ask you to become less. It will meet you as you are and make space for even more of you to emerge. 4. That's how you know it's real. It expands you. It energizes you. It inspires you to dream bigger, speak louder, love harder. 4. It doesn't drain you until you're running on emotional fumes. And here's the philosophical heart of it. Love, at its essence, is reciprocal. 4. It's an exchange of presence, attention, care, and vulnerability. When that exchange becomes one-sided, it stops being love and starts becoming a transaction. And transactions always keep score. Love doesn't. Love gives without depletion because it flows in both directions. But when you're with an avoidant, 4, it's like trying to build a bridge from one side. No matter how much effort you invest, the gap never closes. So the question you have to ask yourself is simple. 4, is this relationship expanding me or diminishing me? Because if it's diminishing you, it doesn't matter how much history, chemistry, 4, or hope you've invested. It's not love, it's captivity. And staying in something that depletes you isn't noble. 4, it's self-abandonment dressed up as loyalty. You are not here to slowly disappear to keep someone else comfortable. You are here to live fully, love deeply, and become everything you're capable of becoming. The right relationship will fuel that fire, not extinguish it. 4. So stop settling for love that drains you just because you're afraid of being alone. Loneliness is temporary. Losing yourself can last a lifetime. Choose the path that nourishes you, because real love doesn't ask you to vanish, it asks you to rise.